Hello students, this is Dr. Johnston and welcome to Emergency Preparedness. We didn't get the chance to do this in class because of the Kaplan exam, so I'm going to post it. Please listen to it. It will be part of the quiz and of course with the next exam. So we're going to look at the interaction between the local, state, and federal emergencies response system. We're going to summarize the role of public and private agencies during emergencies. We're going to compare and contrast some of the things that are used for warfare that are used that causes emergencies like chemical, biological, and radiology and all that. We're going to assess resources that are related to disaster preparedness and how do we communicate, especially when there's a mass casualty, and how do we describe the need for personal preparedness for individual, yourself, your household, and of course your patients. So these are some of the key terminology. Please, it's in the textbook. I'm also including it in the PowerPoint. I need you to know which one is which, recognize it because you might be asked on NCLEX about some of these terminologies. So I need you to know it. I'm not going to read it to you guys. You can read it. Okay. So the basis of emergency preparedness and response can take two approaches. It can be the all hazards approach where they, and we're familiar with this in nursing school, they teach you how to handle the disaster, but it doesn't shut down the healthcare. So we can still go to the disaster and manage it, but the healthcare system is still working. So in that case, this is what we learn in school. But then you have other ones, the more serious one, like bioterrorism attack, the pandemic now that we're in, where instead of instead of just being the first responder, the incident actually comes to us. So the patient will start showing up in the hospitals, and then we have to manage them. So again, everybody needs to know how to manage this. And actually many hospitals conduct mock codes on how to prepare, how to respond, and of course, how to recover. We're going to talk about all that. So we have first responders, and usually when you have some of these attacks, like what we're going through now, you are called to the forefront because your skills are needed. So there are disasters that have happened in United States that, again, if you look at United States compared to other countries, when we have disasters, it's not just affecting the health and the well-being. If you think about other things that are associated when we have bioterrorism or when we have some of the attack, that our patients end up suffering. For instance, with the pandemic that we're going in now, people were quarantined, and most nurses didn't feel the quarantine because nurses continue to go to work. But the people that are quarantined developed psychological disorders. There's an increase in abuse. Some people may not have access to some of the things they normally have access to, like social services and things like that. So it affects not just the people that are in the emergency, but the whole country. So it needs, whenever you have a disaster like that, it needs federal, state, and local assistance. The federal government will step in. They should step in to help to manage some of the issues that usually stem from the disaster. So for instance, with the pandemic, there was a lot of controversy about, did the federal government step in a lot? Did they help? So it's because it's a disaster and it should be all hands on deck. So during crises, nurses, we are trained to manage crises. Like we have codes. If you work in the ER, the priorities are kind of the people that are dying are saved. We have a knack for taking a chaotic environment and kind of keep it calm so that we can work within that parameters. So we are, and this is part of our training, And this is why we're first responders. Now, when there's a terrorist attack or when there's a disaster, our focus is no longer managing that tiny, you know, like in the triage, in the ER, you're looking at the person that has chest pain and that's the person that you take care of. In a terrorist attack or bioterrorism, our priorities change. It becomes to save the person. Who can you save? So it's no longer the people that are critical that are saved. It's the people that are the chances of saving them and their survival are high. So those are the people that you will triage and take care of first. So the resources will shift. Those are the people that will get care first, because the chances of the mass getting all the resources are limited. So it messes with some of our ethical and the, you know, our that sense of do no harm kind of thing, because we're used to saving people. But if you think about what's happening with the pandemic, at one time they started using ventilators for only a certain people, because we ran out of ventilators. So only the people that had the chance of survival ended up getting the ventilators, while the rest are left to die. Again, it has nothing to do with bias or discrimination and all that. It's just that in case of disaster, focus changes. So the nurse has to be cognizant that there are different ways that terrorist attack can happen. Thank God that it has only happened maybe once or twice in our lifetime, but other countries face this almost every day. You have the chemical attack where they use agents to kill people. You know, it can be like nerve agents or even respiratory bioterrorism equipment to maybe go to a mass where people, like, remember the Boston terrorist attack, somebody just went in there and, you know, started shooting. So again, that's not chemical, but it's going into the middle of mass of people and dump something there that will cause people to become sick and die. Then you have the biological. Again, the pandemic that we're going through now, many people will argue that it's a biological warfare, a terrorist attack, because they're using organisms to attack a lot of people worldwide, you know, especially in the United States. The United States is suffering the most. So they're using biological warfare to attack and kill a lot of people. Then you have radiologic. Radiologic is more of using radiation, well, things that can cause chemical changes in the body's molecule to attack people. Again, it depends. Some people will be susceptible to it and some people may not. So, but that can also be used. Nuclear is using like nuclear weapon. And again, in many United States, we haven't experienced somebody coming into United States and dropping a bomb. But we have done that. When we went to Japan, we dropped a bomb. Many people died and still died years and years later, because the nuclear warfare changes your DNA. So some people died just from cancer because they were exposed to the nuclear warfare. They had children that had congenital abnormalities. And even till today, people are still suffering from it, even though it's been years and years. And then you have the explosive, which this is more familiar in United States, especially in New York with 9/11, where they can use, terrorists can use anything to cause explosive that can kill. And the aim of terrorists is to cause the most harm to a lot of people. They don't care who, they don't care if it's white, black, yellow, pink, they don't care. They just want to harm a whole group of people. So using explosive devices to come to, let's say, a ball game, drop it because they know it will cause more harm than good. So these are it's called the CBRNE agents. Please know about them and what are their actions, the advantages and disadvantages of it, and of course the treatment that goes with it. So if you look at this question, A nurse is conducting a community awareness class for the preparedness phase of a terrorist attack and states that the most important common agent used by terrorists is explosive. Number 4, they use it more than the rest because it can easily be made within wherever country they go in. Whereas the rest, you kind of have to justify carrying the chemical or the nuclear warfare or whatever that is. So explosive can be put together by buying things that you normally see in the hardware store and all that. So there are phases of disaster that will, when there's a disaster, the hospitals and first responders, this is how they prepare. The preparedness is more focused on before the disaster happens. So if you go to hospitals, they have more codes, there's policies, protocols of what and they actually practice it. What happens if we have a nuclear disaster, and it will start from the ER and it will go to the unit, everybody participate, the hospital will shut down, hospital police gets involved. So there's a lot of planning that goes into, potential disasters. And then if it does happen, then you have your relief response, where the first emergency responders will go and respond to the victims to stabilize the situation. And of course, the hospital incident command system is activated. These are manned by usually the executives, because they have more power and they can tell people what to do and it could be carried out. And then it will now filter down to the units. And then you have the recovery that usually starts in 72 hours after the disaster. Again, these can go on for 2 to 3 years. If you think about what we're going on with the pandemic, when the pandemic first hit hospitals, it's not that the hospitals weren't prepared, it's just that they didn't expect that it would last as long as it did, and it's still continuing. So it's more of, we're recovering, but it can go back to relief response again. So it's kind of like a cyclic thing, it's not linear. With the relief response, the hospital's priority again is what I explained before, is no longer the sickest, it's actually the people that can survive. So their main responsibility is to protect the patients, the staff, and of course the facility. Then they will now start providing medical care for people that are contaminated or people that are hurt during the disaster. And then the third is to protect the environment from any waste. So if you go to hospital more code, you will see there will be showers outside where they will shower people, of course with privacy, but it's outside before they enter the hospital. That way it's not bringing into the hospital to contaminate the hospital and infect everybody else. You have for the relief, you have different things that are in place. So let's start with the phase, the preparedness phase. In the preparedness phase, there are different units that come together to make things happen for globally. It's not just, it could be state, regional, but federal government step in. I don't know if you were listening to the news during the pandemic, they keep talking about national stockpile. This is actually one of the preparedness that the federal government is supposed to have just in case of disaster. So they're supposed to have been stocking warehouses with things like PPE, IVs, ventilators, all those things just in case, right? They have the Army, they have the emergency medical assistant compact, they call the EMACs, they have the Metropolitan Medical Response System. So everybody is constantly being trained for that preparedness. And then with the relief, you have the incident management system where they actually send out. Some hospitals during the pandemic had the Army nurses and doctors came to help with managing patients and all that. Importance of communication between hospitals, institutions, facilities, and of course, importance of safeguarding the hospital, the staff, and the patients. So again, different things are happening whenever that disaster happens. You might get volunteers. Volunteers usually come from maybe people that are trained to manage disaster, but they may not practice, but then when disaster happens, they are activated because they need to come in and help out. So a lot of volunteers exist. Some of them are doctors, nurses, EMS, nurses, anybody with medical and knowledge could be activated at any time because they are trained. So these are some of the things I talked about. The federal programs to assist the communities, please know about them. Most of them do almost the same things, but they each have the things that they do separately. And the reason behind it is that when disasters happen, they're supposed to step in and help the state and the regional governments. Okay, so if you look at this question, if a nurse is concerned and notify the nursing supervisor when several individuals came to the emergency department within 30-minute period with pinpoint pupils and decreased level of consciousness and respiratory distress, each patient continued to deteriorate rapidly and respiratory failure ensues. The nursing supervisor instructs all staff members to don personal protective equipment. What is the rationale for the level of personal protective equipment that the staff should use? Okay, so the nurse is suspecting that the patients that are coming in has been exposed to something else, like could be chemical, the CBRNE that we talked about. So usually when this is suspected, you of course have to protect yourself because you don't want to be the vector that carries it to other patients. So there are different levels of why and of different levels of PPE, knowing depending on which agent that is suspected. So for level A equipment, that one is for chemical resistant suits, and usually it causes maximum respiratory and skin protection. So the nurse has to be safe. So it's kind of like, if you think of people in the moon, the nurse is dressed from head to toe with PPE. For level B, the equipment is for chemical splash resistant. So it has a hood, it has breathing apparatus, and again, they're suspecting that the agent may have respiratory, can cause respiratory compromise. So less skin protection than level A equipment. So level A is all covered, no skin showing. Level B can be covered, but it's mostly covering the respiratory system so that whatever it is not breathing. Level C, the equipment that is needed should be chemical resistant clothing. You should have a hood, you should have an respirator on. And again, the anticipation is that there's contaminants. We don't know what it is. So it could be chemical, and that by wearing the respirator, it will help to get rid of the contaminants and provide adequate protection for airborne agents, right? So, and for D, may just be for regular uniform and scrub, but it will be determined if it has like respiratory or skin hazard is there, and if the staff need to change depending on the final evaluation. So if somebody comes in and is suspected that there's some type of exposure, it's important to understand that not all PPE are created equal. So there's different PPE for different things, right? So that's why if you see first responders like the police and the firefighters, their PPE is different from what we wear in the hospital. So again, most nurses during the pandemic complained about this, that we know it's respiratory, why aren't we getting the N95? So this is where it comes, because depending on the level that is. So the answer to this would be 3, because there's a probable cause that it's biologic, and the staff had to wear chemical resistant clothing with hood and a respirator to make sure that they're not breathing in anything that will cause them to become unconscious or affect their neurovascular system and cause respiratory distress. Okay, so what do we learn from mass casualties? So in United States, we've had a few like Katrina, 9/11. There are other ones, the Boston Massacre. There's so many of them that has caught us off guard, kind of. But since then, and every time things happen, healthcare continues to refine how we manage these disasters when they occur. I remember when Katrina happened, all the lights went off, and many hospitals don't have generator. So you always wonder, how did they get their medication to their patient? So now it includes that hospital are getting ready for, have generators. They're tested almost frequently to make sure that in case of another Katrina, that you will have power outage, especially now that everybody's electronic health record. And if it does go out, what do we do? Let's say the generator is not working, which shouldn't be. Is there a plan to now transition back to paper, transition back to using equipment that doesn't need electricity? So there are so many things out there. One of the ones that is very prevalent now that many hospitals do plan is medication. Many medication pumps are electric. So after Katrina, the manufacturers started making sure that they're on batteries, meaning it can still be electric, but it needs to be charged just in case if there's power outage, you can use the battery to keep the medication. Something like Pyxis, how do you manage when the Pyxis doesn't open and you need your meds? And how about the vents, like we're dealing with the pandemic? What happens with ventilation? So many hospitals are learning how to do vents without electricity. So there are so many things out there to manage just in case we have another mass casualty. And as you guys can see, that during the pandemic, we did have one, because at one point, we didn't know what to do with dead body. It became too much. And nurses were dying, doctors were dying because they weren't protected. So with some of the biological causes for mass casualty, the pandemic, and COVID-19 is not the first pandemic. It's just the one that we couldn't manage. We've had quite a few, the bird flu, the Ebola, the Zika, the SARS, there's so many of them, the N1, but it was managed. The federal government, the state government, even hospitals managed it that, yes, we had few deaths, but it's not as much as we're having right now with all the deaths that are occurring in the state over COVID-19, or the United States over COVID-19. So the last thing about disaster that many hospitals are now putting into their disaster plan is active shooter events. So in active shooter events, you will be surprised. Many hospitals have reported people coming with guns. Actually, the hospital I worked, a gunman came into the ER and shot a doctor, and it happened to be her husband. And then he took somebody else's life because the doctor was running and was hiding behind someone. So he shot through the person to the doctor. So here you have two people dead because of active shooter events. So what is active shooter event? Well, let's see. Let's look at this video.
Hi, can I get you started with drinks?
Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta take this.
We'll need a minute.
I'm here. Here we go. Stop.
Hey, you need to back up. You can't be here anymore. Get out of my face, what, man. You think I'm afraid of you? Get off, man.
911, there's a clip. I'm no victim. I'm ready for this.
He's applying direct pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding until we can find a tourniquet. In the meantime, turn off your phones and make a plan to defend yourself.
We have to fight to survive. If you control the weapon, you control the shooter. I'll go for the gun. He'll go for his arms. The bartender will go for the head.
Where is he?
We got him right here. Spin
Please,
out.
show me your hands!
Over here.
You can survive a mass shooting if you're prepared. Remember, run, hide, or fight. Run. Wherever you go, be aware of alternate exits. Quickly and cautiously evacuate in a direction away from the attacker. Don't hesitate. Seconds matter. Remember windows and emergency exits. Leave belongings behind. Keep your empty hands raised and clearly visible when exiting a building. Follow all instructions from the police. Don't stop until you're sure you've reached a safe location. Hide. If there is no safe escape route, find a good hiding place. Lock and barricade the door. Silence cell phones. Prepare a defense plan. Fight. Fight only as a last resort. Use available objects as improvised weapons. Use teamwork and surprise. A coordinated ambush can incapacitate an attacker. You're fighting for your life. Don't fight fair. Stop the bleed. A victim can die of uncontrolled blood loss in 5 minutes or less. Apply pressure or a tourniquet to control severe bleeding. Go to fbi.gov/survive to learn more.
Okay, so in summary, many hospitals are now dealing with this. Actually, it's part of the yearly competencies, and more codes, many hospitals take it so seriously that they practice more codes almost like every 6 months, especially in high-risk areas like emergency rooms, maybe inpatient once in yearly, but mostly emergency rooms, clinics, where you have very high level of traffic. So most people, most hospitals will practice this. What to know is what's in the video. You run, evacuate if you can. Make sure that once you're outside or you're a safe place that you call 911 to report. And one of the things to learn with running is that if, you don't need to take your bag and your wallet and your car keys, just leave everything. It's not worth it, just leave. And keep your hands visible, because sometimes the police, they don't know who the active shooter is. So if you're hiding your hands, they may think it's you and shoot you. So make sure your hands are visible. So keep your hands up as you're running. But let's say you can run, then hide it out. When you hide, make sure you turn off your cell phones, because if you're hiding from somebody and the cell phone kind of goes off, they will know where you are. And try to remain calm. It's easy to say remain calm, but it's one of those things that you need a level head to be able to survive. One of the questions that come up is, how about the patients? Do we leave our patients? Yes, because if you're hiding out in the patient room, then you're going to block the door and, of course, secure your patients and all that. But if you're not around the patient, let's say you're in the nursing station when this shooting starts, run. Because by trying to go get your patients and all that, you might get in the way of the bullet. take action against the active shooter. So let's say there's nothing else to do, they're right in front of your face, you can fight back. But that's the last resort. Don't go being the hero. But if your life is at stake, you can fight back. The shooter that I talked about that came to the emergency room, it was fought off by PCTs because they could, he was in their face, was about to shoot them, and of course they took the gun and and all that. So very important. It's happening more and more in healthcare settings, especially now that we have increasing patients with psych issues and all that. Okay, so this is the end of the lecture. Please listen to it. Use your PowerPoint. It will be in the quiz this week. Okay, take care. Have a good day.